And thanks for staying with us on the Strictly Stripes podcast. Joining me is my very special guest, the longtime voice of the Cincinnati Bengals radio network, Dan Hoard, who is prepping for one of his busiest weeks of the year for the AFC Championship. And Dan, I was going to say, you've prepped for the conference championship before at this time last year. Does it get a little easier just after prepping for it one time already?
You know, it's a little bit easier because they've already played. So a lot of my homework about the Kansas City Chiefs is already finished. Plus, they played twice last year. And the two games last year were both late in the year. So this will be the fourth game between these two teams since January 2nd of last year. So obviously, I'll make sure everything is up to date. But I feel like I could watch a Chiefs game right now and identify all of the players just from having seen these two teams so much.
So if I were to just quiz you and throw a random number from the Chiefs roster, you would just get the name off the fly?
I'd rather you didn't, just in case I get it wrong, but I'd probably be able to do most of them, yes.
Oh, I'm just having fun with you. But no, I mean, I think that's actually one of the hardest jobs with play-by-play because I did some of that before I started doing this job with cleveland.com, for those who don't know. So I know what it's all about, making your spotting boards, memorizing the rosters. It's a fun challenge, though. I will say that. It's an enjoyable challenge, as you can attest to. But, yeah, it's a lot of fun. I know you'll be having a blast in the booth this week with Dave Lapham. But like you said, this is the fourth meeting since last year. They met 3 times in the 2022 calendar year. And I know people like to kind of talk about this sort of headline, but, you know, the whole Burrow versus Mahomes kind of matchup is becoming a real thing. Like, this is their second playoff meeting, both times in the conference championship, but Mahomes hasn't beaten Burrow yet. But Mahomes hasn't even beaten the Bengals since 2018 when the Bengals played in Kansas City on Sunday Night Football. So it's been quite a job for him. How do you see Andy Reid, being the chess mastermind he is, you know, doing anything maybe differently to stop Joe Burrow and just the success they've had since they've played them?
Well, Andy Reid is one of the greatest coaches in NFL history on both sides of the ball. Steve Spagnuolo will be the guy who's trying to conjure up plans to slow down Joe Burrow. I think Andy spends most of his time concentrating on the offensive end. It's going to be really interesting to see. We don't know who the quarterback is going to be for Kansas City for sure. I assume it will be Patrick Mahomes, but the dude has a high ankle sprain. It could be grade 1, 2, or 3. If it's 3, he wouldn't play. So I think we can rule that out. But it could be grade 1 or grade 2. If it's grade 1, he'll be okay. He'll be able to move around a little bit. If it's grade 2, he'll be stationary. And that forces the Chiefs to change what they do. He threw more passes outside of the pocket than any quarterback in the NFL this year. It's one of his strengths. So it's going to be really interesting to see how much different this game looks from a typical Cincinnati-Kansas City game.
You know, Lou Anarumo said when he spoke with the media the other day was that he's going to prepare for Patrick Mahomes whether he's on one leg or 2 legs because he's just that good. I mean, some people might say Jacksonville shot itself in the foot in that divisional game in Arrowhead, but at the same time, I mean, that doesn't take away from what Mahomes did after he went back in with that high ankle sprain that you mentioned. So Anarumo makes a very good point that it is going to be tough. It is going to be challenging. From his point of view, kind of flipping it back to the Bengals, I mean, what do you do if you're Anarumo? Depending on, obviously, you know, whatever level sprain Mahomes has, do you see Anarumo doing things differently? Because he's 2-0 against Mahomes. He just had a good game against Josh Allen. I mean, Josh Allen is just another tally to his long list of victims that he's had this year. Nick Chubb, Derrick Henry. What does he do differently if he does anything?
Well, he will do something differently, and I think that was going to be the case regardless of the status of Patrick Mahomes' ankles. You can't do the same thing against him 2 games in a row. So let's go back to the AFC Championship game last year. In the second half of the game, the Bengals almost exclusively rushed 3, dropped 8, changed the coverages on every snap, used Sam Hubbard like he was a middle linebacker to spy Patrick Mahomes, and it worked brilliantly. The Chiefs didn't score a touchdown in the second half or overtime. Then when they met earlier this year, the plan was different. We didn't see that much of that because the Chiefs adjusted. They knew after the AFC Championship game last year that teams would watch that tape and figure, well, there's your blueprint. That's how you slow down Patrick Mahomes. So they tried to do it this early this year, and he picked it apart. So the bottom line is, every time you face the combination of Reid and Mahomes, You've got to change things up. And it's one of Lou Anarumo's strengths. And one of the reasons why it's a strength is because he has one of the smartest defenses in the NFL. It's not just that these are great players, and they are, but they're really smart players. So with Bell and Bates coordinating the secondary, Sam Hubbard being the movable piece that he is, Wilson and Pratt recognizing things quickly at the linebacker position. He's a mad scientist because he's got the things in his beakers and above the Bunsen burner to be able to do scientific things as creatively as he does. And that's going to be a huge key, again, regardless of the status of Patrick Mahomes' right ankle this week.
Andrew Rumo says he's not a big